Hi there, my name is Jeff Evely. I'm the Ops Sergeant Major with the Veterans for Freedom, back with you now. And I have with me Tom Quiggan. He's our intelligence officer. He's here to give us the intelligence breakdown of the events that transpired at the monument yesterday during the arrival ceremony for James-Topp. There was an incident where 4 people were arrested. There were some problems there. It got a little bit violent right up to the steps of the monument. So the police made multiple arrests. And as I presented in the podcast yesterday, the mainstream media outlets, particularly the Globe and Fail and the CBC, are reporting James-Topp's arrival as 4 arrests made as soldier charged with conduct to the prejudice of good order and discipline, blah, blah, blah. So they're doing their very best to present this with the most negative spin that they can. But all the indications that we've been able to dig up so far, at least as far as I've been able to dig up yesterday, seem to indicate that these people were not part of the party for with James-Topp. They were most likely counter demonstrators there to agitate in order to assist the media in their endeavors to paint the entire freedom movement as violent and extremist. So without further ado, I'll hand this over to Tom, and Tom's going to give us a quick rundown before we dive into some analysis of the videos that some new videographic evidence that we have to present today. So over to you, Tom.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I think I'll just pick up on one of the terms you used there as you were introducing this, agitators. Very clear to me, and I think anybody else who watches the videos of the incident we're referring to, is that these folks had nothing to do with the march. We know that they were at Hogsback earlier when James-Topp arrived at the Hogsback area, and these were the people who'd set road flares and lit them off so the smoke would sort of drift into the crowd to try and disrupt the arrival, or at least 2 of them were there setting the flares off. A few of our folks noticed them again at the Pretoria Bridge, saw them there. And then, of course, they were there at the arrival ceremony and willfully, I would say, had a head-on run at the police, tried to create an incident. One of them, of course, as you probably mentioned already, put an Ottawa police person in a chokehold, which, of course, is asking for trouble no matter where you are in the world. And there we go. There was a kerfuffle. The 4 of them got arrested and dragged off. In order to understand this, I think from sort of a strategic level, have to realize, I think the government of Canada is involved in a full-on information war against its own citizenry. And of course, particularly anybody who doesn't immediately fall into line with their social justice warrior mandates, their vaccine mandates. You have to accept that everybody is a racist. You have to accept everybody is misogynist or Islamophobic, transphobic, or whatever it is we're all supposed to be. If you do not immediately fall into that line, the government and the mainstream media will come after you. So I think it's probably just worth mentioning to viewers right now, CBC gets, I'm not quite sure what it is anymore, I've lost track, it's about $1.5 billion a year. The mainstream media is part of a parcel handout of about $600 million in cash to a variety of friendly media.
Some
And
of
then there
which
was
came
about
out
another,
immediately before the last election. That's
yeah,
something they've gotten in the habit of doing every election rolls around.
yeah. And during the pandemic itself, difficult to say, numbers are hard to get, at least accurate numbers are hard to get, but it looks like about $200 million in advertising by the government about vaccines, et cetera, went out to mainly friendly media platforms. Rebel News didn't get any, and neither did anybody else. So if you're friendly to the government, you got this additional subsidy through large amounts of advertising dollars. So as you and I've talked before, I think the convoy itself, Freedom Convoy 2022, was a fairly clear demonstration of how the government launched an info war before it even got there, and is continuing it today. And I think it's also fascinating to sit. We're here right now doing this while Tamara Leash is in a courtroom not too far away from us. And as far as I can tell from examining the court documents that are available and the discussions going on, the big thing the Crown Attorney has is she's seen in a picture with Tom Marazzo, and that's the violation. The fact that her lawyers were in the room, as they were required to be, doesn't seem to throw them off. And most interestingly, the Crown submitted 2 documents this morning, one with 1,000 pages in it, the other with 1,400 pages in it. And this was stunning to me because I testified against Momin Khawaja on a global Al-Qaeda inspired terrorist case where a group of terrorists in 3 countries were working together to build a bomb that was going to weigh about 800 kilos. We didn't put that much effort and work into his bail hearing as the Crown is putting in Tamara Leish's bail hearing, and she's accused of, oh my God, mischief or counseling someone to commit mischief. So I think reasonable to say her case in the same framework, that what we see here is it's an ongoing info war, and it's clear to me that she's a political prisoner. So to drill down a bit more into this specific event, when we go through the video, and I was there at the march as well, so saw some of the stuff that was going on at the time. As we drill down into this event, it's fairly fair to say that these folks were agitators. They were there to cause trouble. They can cause trouble because the media and the government of Canada creates a political space where it's actually acceptable and in fact encouraged to perform in this way during major peaceful events. It's also worth noting that none of the V4F members were involved in any of the trouble causing, but it is worth noting that as soon as the trouble itself began, V4F members formed a wall between the arrest scene itself and the crowd that was closing in. Obviously, some out of just curiosity, some were agitating for violence, some people are agitating, kill the police, jump on the police, and this sort of stuff. So V4F actually assisted in the de-escalation of the conflict, which is consistent with V4F is what it's supposed to be doing, and it's highly consistent with James-Topp's idea of peaceful, legitimate protests. So, like you pointed at the start, what do we see in the media? Oh my God, there were 4 arrests because some reservist was there. So, again, the media deliberately looks for the worst possible interpretation, takes the truth, inverts it on its head, and then pushes that ahead. And just for folks that don't know, James-Topp, yes, he was a reservist for a while, but he was also a career regular member of the Canadian Forces with conflict tours in a couple of different countries. So you don't see the media mention that, he's got combat tours in foreign countries. Oh, he's a reservist and he was charged for speaking out against the vaccine. So again, it's just a part of that whole information war, Jeff. The good news is, I think, and maybe you and I should talk about this at some point, that the sort of difference between the convoy and the James-Topp-Arrival, we're looking at, sort of like 4 months of time has gone by, etc. But in that 4 months, you can see the winds have changed. As hard as the convoy tried to get a hearing with the government, which of course it's the right of citizens to petition the Crown. You have the right to address Parliament. The convoy couldn't get that. But James-Topp and that organization around him was able to get a number of meetings with a number of members of Parliament. A contender for the leadership race of the Conservative Party showed up. The head of the People's Party of Canada showed up. So I think you can kind of see the politicians, if they got their finger wet, they stick it up in the air, they can feel the wind is changing. And I think that's a positive thing. I think the government.
More than that, I would throw in, Tom, like just on a one-to-one level at the grassroots level, it seemed like from what I saw and from what I heard that the reception and response from Ottawa police, especially with respect to Veterans for Freedom presence at the monument during that time, has warmed quite a bit. Like they're not as hostile anymore, and they actually seem to be somewhat appreciative of the fact that we're there for all the right reasons. What do you have to say on that?
Yeah, I think it was interesting when the procession and the march itself showed up at the War Memorial. And for folks who can't picture it, it's a triangular piece of ground. It can accommodate several thousand people standing. It's quite a chunk of territory. By the time the procession got there, the whole place was packed. The streets around it were packed. The Ottawa Police Liaison Team kind of showed up on site at the War Memorial, kind of looked all around, said, had a nice day, and they took off and they left. I think recognizing that nothing happening in the War Memorial itself was going to be a problem because it's being run by James-Topp's Canada Marches crowd and assisted by folks like Veterans for Freedom, Take Back Our Freedom, and a whole bunch of other folks. No problems there. Also, it's worthy of note, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble here, but the Ottawa police not once but twice came back to Veterans for Freedom after that event, thanking us for the ability to de-escalate that before it got into a real problem. And of course, that fits in with our whole policy of, ahimsa. It fits in with the whole peaceful thing, that your first obligation when you see this kind of violence is to de-escalate it and push it back and to neutralize it by doing that. So I think amongst the Ottawa police, especially the frontline members, and here we're talking, the constables, corporals, and the sergeants kind of a thing.
Rank and
Most of
file.
them, yeah, most of them are smart enough to recognize there's two things going on here. One, there's a government over here and there's law and order that has to be maintained. But over here, you've got a population that wants to express its discontent with government. Of course, the police are always caught in the crossfire there, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
But I think V4F has had, in the last month, we put a hell of a lot of work into identifying the trouble causers at these things, into identifying who's going to put stress on us, who's going to try and attack us. And I think by having successfully done that, we've been able to convince at least some of the authorities that we're the good guys in all of this. We're the people who are in favor of the Constitution, the Charter of Rights, and peace.
Right. That's all very encouraging to hear. Of course, I'm disappointed that I couldn't be at the monument myself to see the interaction with police firsthand. But it's encouraging because what I saw during the convoy, there was a kind of animus, I think, there where there was a kind of they were operating on a completely different sheet of music than we were, and when they got down there, there seemed to be a kind of contempt for the people that were there just as rabble rousers and troublemakers and everything that the media had been saying that they were. But I found that throughout the course of the day, perhaps that shifted a little bit in at least in the eyes of the police, as far as I could see, and perhaps they were starting to realize that there was a little bit more going on here than they had been led to believe. So hopefully we're starting to see some of this activism bear fruits, especially in terms of winning over those hearts and minds amongst the rank and file, because my position is that it's not the rank and file that we need to be worried about right now. It's the leadership, and that these people are being misled to think that there are violent elements of this, like that any potentially extremist elements of the freedom movement are anything like in the mainstream. So they seem to be waking up a little bit over there. What did you have any interactions with the liaison teams that made that would lead you to believe that there's maybe a rapport starting to build there with V4F, or how do you see things going forward? Room for optimism, or?
Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I'm cautiously optimistic that the winds are starting to change a bit.
Yeah.
The things are moving in our favor. More people are becoming awake and understanding what's happening to our country. And I think the 3 weeks leading up to James-Topp-Arrival, I can't think how many different interactions I've had with police services at the municipal, provincial, and federal level. Probably about 10 different meetings with these folks, and constantly showing them this is what we're doing, this is how we work, this is what we believe in. And I remember just for fun, I think the second time I met with them, I actually talked about the policy of ahimsa, which is a sort of Hindu, Buddhist, Jainist kind of idea, deeply rooted in Indian culture, that says you should never offer violence to another living being. And when I first said that, they kind of looked at me and then they kind of laughed. And then they kind of sat there, and then they didn't know what to do, and they were massively awkward when I think they realized we're actually serious about this. And they can't really understand it because they say, you guys are vets, you're trained in destruction. The sort of standard joke is, the job of the military is to kill people and break things.
Yeah.
But I think they missed the idea, or at least they had missed the idea earlier, that what drives the military ahead is discipline and leadership, that we can bring discipline, we can bring order, we can bring structure, which is what we want to bring to the various protest movements. We ourselves in V4F don't want to be leading the protest movements. We want to help folks by organizing them and making look like they're sensible groups. So one of, I think, the most effective things that happened on the whole James-Topp-Arrival thing is I was about the third or fourth rank back at the head of the procession. And at a certain point, I turned around and I looked back along the canal as it goes into a big long curve, and you can see for over a kilometer. And we had a kilometer-long procession of people in 3 ranks the whole way back. So we were able to just get like a whole gaggle of civilians and ex-military guys into 3 ranks in a column over a kilometer long. And the picture of just that is amazing. This isn't a mob, rampaging down the street. This isn't a bunch of, football fans or something at Liverpool or whatever, terrorizing a bunch of folks. This was a bunch of ex-military guys, a bunch of civilians, and a bunch of just regular people into an organized group, moving on the government, showing them that we're here, we're serious, we have a message, and you need to lead us. And I think for the police and for a lot of other observers, they were kind of fascinated by that whole ability to present this in an organized, coherent kind of way, rather than a bunch of folks out in the street yelling and screaming, throwing signs around.
Yeah, and I'd say that's paying dividends. And also, I'd also just throw in a little piece here because I've kind of been tracking that the media is really using that veteran card as a means of stigmatization against a lot of the folks in the freedom movement, particularly by sort of seizing on the controlled application of violence that the whole military effort really kind of supports in the ultimate sense. But it seems to me that that those folks on that side of the issue are really missing the whole point of military service. I mean, we serve the cause of human dignity, and it's really about loving what's behind you, not hating what's in front of you. It's war itself and everything that military operations does is about harm mitigation. Like I would throw war in there in the same category as something like disaster relief, or it's like air defense. It's about maintaining peace, stability, and order. Sometimes that really kind of comes down to an issue of force. Most people don't really understand a lot about force, and we're seeing a lot of that with I think the people at the monument, where they're talking about how it's not a fair fight between the cops and the demonstrators. So maybe we have a kind of kinship, with the thin blue line over there, where they're kind of put in that misunderstood category as well. And they've been taking a lot of heat from the media as well. They're going after the RCMP with all the same institutional racism stuff that they're coming after the military for. The left-wing types, the cosmopolitan types, tend to look down on and stigmatize people who serve, who have to apply those the controlled application of violence. So maybe there's enough common ground there that we can gain a little bit more support, at least tacit and unofficial, from the rank and file over there. But without further ado, Tom, I'm just going to share my screen with you here because we have some footage for the arrests that I just mentioned. Where the police are up on the mountain and they're taking down some of these folks that certainly appear at least to be on the counter demonstrator side of things. So just hang on here. I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah, just for the viewers, when they see this guy with the do-rag on his head who's actually physically trying to choke the Ottawa policewoman, this is the same guy who was at Hogsback and was lighting off the flares. So it wasn't like it was just an incident that went bad. These guys were there to cause trouble, and they demonstrated that early on.
Right. Here's our clip now. It's on TikTok. It's from Dacey Media there. That's Chris Dacey. He's been really good throughout this whole thing, so make sure you check him out. Look at like a man for doing that.
I have no idea. Tell me what to do. I want to cooperate, please. I want to cooperate, please.
Now, interesting. interesting just to note, Jeff, you can see a series of Ottawa police wearing yellow vests forming a line there.
Yeah.
The line between them and the crowd was actually formed by B4F. So the B4F guys were able to sort of separate the crowd from the police and prevent that escalation. It was interesting. A few folks in the crowd were yelling at B4F, you know, attack the cops, kill the cops. Why aren't you doing this sort of stuff? And it's like, no, we're here for James-Topp. We're here to celebrate his march across Canada. We're not here to advocate violence against the state. Now, if folks want to advocate violence against the state, that's up to them. If you want to do it, go do it. But, you know, don't do it with us around and don't do it at our thing. If you want to have that kind of stuff, go start your own demos.
Yeah, for sure. And I usually advocate for something like taking a knee. You know, if you're about to get cattled and arrested and stuff like that, just don't give them the optics that they're looking for. Don't resist, and don't give them anything they can use to kind of tar the movement as violent. So I say just take a knee, go down peacefully, and you know, as a sign of like mourning for the freedoms that we've lost. But I'll continue with the video. And I got this guy with the beard over here that is tracking. That's the guy who had the headband on. They're grabbing his hair. Yeah, that's why soldiers keep their hair short.
I have no idea.
Yeah, it's a bit of a repeat from before. But I'm just gonna. This looks like it's all just the same stuff here. This is the kind of stuff where people kind of get worked up because they think it's unfair. You know, maybe there should only be one cop there taking that guy down. So that's, I think, what a lot of people end up getting worked up about.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning again that these guys had originally used road flares to try and disrupt the ceremony, and then they were provoking the police. So, you know, it's clear to me as someone who's testified in court and done this kind of thing, those guys were there with malice aforethought. I mean, launching flares at people or, you know, putting them on a road to try and block folks, you know, clear sign of malice. And no coincidence that the folks that did that are the same folks that show up in these videos. And of course, one of them actually had an Ottawa policewoman in a chokehold from behind. And say what you want about, you know, anything or anybody, if you put somebody in a chokehold from behind, you kind of have to expect bad things to happen from that person's friends or colleagues. If you choose to initiate violence against the superior force, you kind of have to expect the idea you're going to get beat down at a certain point. So, you know, I'm not really in favor of all this kind of stuff, but same old story. If you're going to be stupid, if you're going to go out there and offer violence to a highly superior force at a completely inappropriate moment, you kind of have to expect bad things to happen, Jeff.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know if you said it or not, Tom, but I'm pretty sure it was a female officer that he was trying to choke from behind.
Yeah, which, you know, maybe does or doesn't make a difference, but it's the same sort of thing. If you're going to, you know, if you're going to use physical violence to attack a woman, regardless of whether she's wearing a uniform or not, once again, you kind of have to expect bad things to come back at you. So yeah, there it is. And I think it's fascinating. Of course, the media didn't mention anything about the flares. They didn't mention anything about the provocation. They didn't mention anything about B4F forming the wall. They only choose to use they choose to make stuff up in many cases, or they choose information which will only suit a certain cause. And you could say, well, you know, fog of war, it kind of happened. And it's like, well, no, it happens every time. And it's consistent across many different events, and it's consistent across a large period of time. So, yeah, this to me is very much, the whole media reporting on this is just consistent with the government's info war against anyone who oppresses them. And I use the term, just so folks know here, info war. I'm not using that in an offhand way. Governments always use information to support their positions or to advance a certain policy or idea. But in this case, it is a deliberate application of a methodology which they use repeatedly over a period of time to discount and destroy their opposition, and at the same time create a physical space where violence is acceptable as long as it's used in support of the government. So the Antifa types can do it, You can launch a terrorist attack on a oil facility in British Columbia. Nobody gets arrested. You can burn a bunch of churches down in Canada, and like one person got, I think, fined or something like that for the whole thing. But yet this, they take, a relatively small incident by a number of provocateurs, and they turn it into oh my God, look, veterans are crazy people, and here they are causing all this violence, when our role in that was the exact opposite of what they're reporting.
Yeah, exactly. I was just trying to find a screenshot that I had on the podcast there yesterday. But it was the guy with the bandana. I don't know if it's a Canadian flag. It looked like it was red. He was wearing the red flag, and he had some kind of pirate outfit on or something. He had the white sleeves and the vest on, and he was the one that was trying to choke the officer from behind. And I had a really good graphic there of him doing that. But you can kind of see, I got this next clip. You can kind of see the immediate aftermath. So if you can see here, the guy, he kind of dressed like a pirate to me. He's got like this brown outfit, brown pants, brown vest with the white sleeves and the white shirt on underneath there. He has long hair, and you have a cop who's just grabbed him and pulled him away from where he was trying to choke that officer. And I think this is the bearded guy I mentioned in the last clip. He seems to be with this pirate guy, and he's trying to defend the pirate guy from the police. So the police end up taking him down as well. Here we go. Yeah, he just got his shirt ripped there. The beard guy.
Everything.
He was rushing the dog, and then there you go.
I don't know why.
I'll just throw in there, you can hear some of the commentary from the people who were on scene, and some of the guys are saying it's like 10 on 1 and stuff like that. But that's what it looks like, guys. That's what overwhelming force looks like. Okay, like the safety of the attending officers is absolutely paramount here. So they're not going to go fisticuffs with people in the streets one-on-one on a daily basis. And let's just hope that justice prevails. I mean, this is just one of these things that has to happen. Justice has to prevail. And the only way that is sustainable is with overwhelming force, and the safety of the officers being paramount.
Yeah, and once again, Jeff, you can notice there's two V4F guys. I think that's Tom right there with the green shirt on. Are again trying to put themselves between the crowd and the police in order to de-escalate. So once again, the media narrative about the veterans are the violent ones causing the problem. In fact, the only folks there that were actually doing de-escalation were V4F. So again, you kind of have to laugh at the mainstream media.
Yeah.
Depending what poll you look at, depending whose information you believe, depending what questions are asked, the number of people who trust the mainstream media right now, at the high end, it's in the low 40s, 42, 44% of people trust the mainstream media. Those are high end numbers. If you look at more specific polls where they focus in on certain groups or certain media organizations, the numbers are in the mid to low teens. You're sort of in used car salesman kind of territory. So I think one of the things that the convoy did, and one of the things the James-Topp-Arrival ceremony did, is it puts another nail in the coffin of the mainstream media. The more they sort of yell wolf, 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 the more people start to understand that the problem is the media. And I remember that great poster somebody had at the convoy. The virus is the media. The media is the virus. Yeah. And I think that's what we sort of need to look at here in Canada, is as Canada becomes increasingly divided, increasingly angry, increasingly split, as the politics of identity divide people into smaller and smaller subgroups, and as the media and the government continue to agitate for violence, as they continue to create a space for political violence to occur, we have to realize that, Canadians left to our own devices actually get along pretty well. We can get things done. The James-Topp-Arrival ceremony showed we got thousands upon thousands of people all out in an atmosphere of compassion and happiness and rebuilding and rejuvenation. Mm-hmm. And then four idiots are able to temporarily, for about 2 minutes, upset that. And of course, that's what the media focuses on, is the hate and the anger, which they help create.
Yeah, exactly. And I might even back that up just another step further. It's not just the media that is the virus. It's more like a mind virus, you know. And Gad Saad talks about this quite a bit. I think he's a professor at the University of Montreal, and he's an economist, I think. But he talks about the parasitic mind, you know, and how these ideologies can kind of seize on the mind, and you end up with a kind of compartmentalization where critical thinking doesn't apply anymore in the deeply indoctrinated mind. And so we have a class generation of media personalities that have kind of come through this institution of academia that's been indoctrinating people into a communist worldview, at least as far back as the 70s, and now we have a propaganda machine where free media once was. So I see a kind of corrupting influence coming out of there as well. But more of the video. Here's Tom coming up. He's in the bottom right of the screen. He's got his V4F t-shirt on. It's Tom Marazzo.
That's wrong. That's wrong. I don't have to listen to you either.
Yeah, he's saying 50 cops on one person.
Arrested me, he has to be arrested, but not 50.
It's going to be 50, guys. It's going to be 50.
No, I'm staying right here. I'm staying right here. Don't ask me to do that again.
Well, worth pointing out again, these kinds of folks showed up ahead of time, prepared to use flares and megaphones and that kind of stuff to willfully disrupt a ceremony. And then and again, just to say it one more time, if you physically attack somebody from behind and put them in a chokehold, you have to figure it's going to end badly. If you choose to do that with somebody as a group of their friends there, you know it's going to end badly. So sympathy factor in this case for these guys is fairly low because they were there as provocateurs to cause violence. And if you cause violence, well, in a civil society, that's what happens to you.
Yeah, I mean, if you provoke violence, you should expect a violent response. And when it comes to matters of the state, it will be swift and overwhelming. You know, I see one of the guys in this still here even has a baton, but yeah. So I mean, when you're choking an officer, I think a fellow officer would be very much in his right mind to club your skull in with that thing. Yeah, I'm being a bit facetious there, but you get the idea. I don't think that there was anything in the way of excessive force here. They're really just holding people down at the end of the day. And we're talking about beat cops here. They're not all black belts in Krav Maga. So, you know, I know when I was getting taken down in Ottawa, I was very facilitating and accommodating by putting my own hands behind my back as I was laying face down, because if I didn't, they might have tried to bend my arms the wrong way. That's how much experience, you know, some of these young folks have and stuff like that. So I think it's important to be understanding of that as well.
Yeah. Also worth noting that out of the entire James-Topp-Arrival ceremony, notwithstanding this gaggle of idiots that tried to provoke violence, nobody was injured. Nobody went to hospital. No ambulances were involved. No Band-Aids were involved. So in terms of actual physical violence responsible for injury, that didn't actually occur either. Those guys obviously got a face plant and got to say hello to the bricks. But none of them were actually physically injured, cut. Nobody had any bones broken. Nobody got sprains. Nothing.
No,
so
it looks way worse
notwithstanding
than
their
this.
efforts, yeah, there we go. So, all right, Jeff. Well, that was kind of an interesting look at the whole scenario. And one of the things we may want to talk about in the future, we should take a serious look at. You know, we've run into a bunch of people at this thing, at the James-Topp-Arrival ceremony. We've run into people in other places who actually advocate violence against the state. And I think at a certain point, we need to tell the people, most of the ones who are advocating it probably have never been involved in a violent activity themselves in the real sense of the term. And if you want to advocate violence against the state, again, I will say, you know, that's up to you if that's what you want to do. But do understand that even if you win an initial skirmish or you're able to create an act of violence, you are going to be met with massive, overwhelming, deadly force, and you're going to get killed. And for anybody that's been to a conflict zone, anybody that's seen a mass grave, anybody that's been in even like a refugee camp to see the damage that comes out of this kind of stuff is unreal. And I think one of the reasons Veterans for Freedom is involved in this sort of stuff is we've been in places like Bosnia, Croatia, Albania, Afghanistan, Iraq, Mali, the Central African Republic, the Golan Heights, Lebanon, Israel, Colombia, Nicaragua, you name it. We've had veterans in
Afghanistan, Iraq.
every hellhole on the planet. And I think one of the things veterans recognize better than many other people, just because of our experience, not because we're smarter, but just because we've been there, is we understand what happens to a civil society when it goes sideways. Bosnia and Croatia were actually kind of nice places. The parts that were pretty nice until, of course, the artillery opened up and the tanks came in and the death camp started, and it turned into an absolute living hell. Parts of Iraq weren't actually all that bad until, whatever. But so
Yeah,
just
I guess I would point out, just to give our viewers maybe a good point of contact on this, because I'm right there with you, Tom. I understand why it is that the veterans are getting so vociferous on this, but the thing is, like, look at guys like George Orwell. Okay, he was a veteran of World War One. He fought the fascists in Spain. He gained a bit of a keen eye for the kinds of cultural harbingers of coming tyranny and genocide while he was there, and I think that helped him to be a keen observer of what happened in the Soviet Union there, and that's why he was so insightful in his writing, in presenting these kinds of social harbingers through metaphor. And the same is true of Hemingway as well. He was a medic in the First World War. And so he wrote extensively on these kinds of social phenomena as well, for whom the bell tolls, and the kind of human cost that really comes with this kind of chicanery. I think is what it is at the end of the day. It's kind of this political chicanery, and our leaders are playing games with people's lives. And at this moment in our history, I think our leaders are the kinds of folks who perhaps are a bit out of touch in that sense, where they've never necessarily been touched by war or by conflict like this in a first hand or even a second hand basis. So they're being rather cavalier with their wielding of power at the moment, and it's all about winning with no sense of the kind of human costs that come with that. Those are my thoughts on that. Anyway, rant over you, Tom.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, brother. Listen, thanks a lot for coming on again, Tom. It's really insightful, and I appreciate the breakdown. So we'll have you on again soon, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Okay. Cheers, Jeff.
Take care, everybody.